Discover over 100 episodes of Bartholomew Town on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is the Bartholomew Town Podcast.
The schools are in trouble. You have to be living under a rock not to know that, especially the Providence school system. But that's not a unique challenge. You have other cities that are in towns facing the same thing.
Are you worried about the evergreen contracts, and that conflicting with that, the ability to keep tabs, if you will, on where the money's going, from a personnel standpoint?
So the answer is no, and I know a little bit about this because I had a municipal background, and also, most people don't know when they say evergreen, as I always say to them, have you read the bill? And then you hear silence because very few people have actually read the bill.
And welcome into another edition of the Bartholomew Town Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Bartholomew. On today's episode, my sit-down with Rhode Island House Majority Leader, Representative Joe Shekarchi. Good to catch up with Leader Shekarchi just as the Rhode Island General Assembly session coming to a close here. Governor Raimondo signing the new budget. Lots to break down, including the national story emanating from Providence right now with respect to the Providence public schools and, education throughout the entire state. So a look inside some of the thought process that went into the new budget, at least in terms of the perspective of House leadership. Hope you're having a spectacular summer. Get out there and enjoy it. Perhaps you're even listening right now as you head down to the beach. Support for Bartholomew Town comes from Lagunitas Brewing Company, helping to present Elmwood Songwriters Club, a recurring performance series featuring intimate sets by Rhode Island artists from a variety of communities, held at the Bartholomew Town Loft in the Elmwood neighborhood of Providence. Okay, without further ado, my conversation with House Majority Leader, Representative Joe Shekarchi. You feel strongly about this budget that was put forth, and you're comfortable with it on a basic level?
Yes, to answer your question. Every budget is a compromise between the Senate and the House. It's a collaborative effort. I don't think the House got everything it wanted. I don't think the Senate got everything they wanted. I don't think the governor got everything they wanted. But at the end of the day, it's about the work product, and I think it's a good budget. It reduces another year of car taxes. There are no broad-based tax increases. We heard from many people in the business community they were against the Medicare tax. They were against the taxes on professional services. Those were not part of the budget. Also, I'm proud to say that we have a tax cut in the budget for small business. That's something I worked on very hard. It affects about 30% of Rhode Islanders, and they will see a tax cut on their small business tax returns next year.
Economic stimulation at any level is kind of, we're gasping for air in some ways here. We need it. We want it. Do you feel like small businesses that's where it should start? That's where it should begin in Rhode Island, and that's why that tax cut is most effective in your mind?
I think it's something that it's revenue neutral to the state of Rhode Island, so why not? And I think a couple of reasons. We have some other programs in the budget that are also enhance small business. But with this particular tax cut, the thing that I've done, and I have to credit my staff, we did a lot of research on it, is something that Connecticut's doing, and it's a strategic state and local tax cap workaround. And it doesn't sound sexy, and not a lot of people understand it. Quite frankly, I had to reach out to a lot of my friends in the CPA community to get a handle on it. But what it does, it doesn't cost the state of Rhode Island anything. It allows small businesses to be taxed just the way big businesses are and enjoy the same benefits right now. And 30% of Rhode Islanders will see, according to the Pew Institute, a benefit from this. So why not do it? And sometimes when I campaign and I live and work in the community, I interact with small business, they say, it's great. You have these big programs that you've enacted. I had a jobs credit in the budget about 5 years ago. We see real tangible benefits with GE coming here. And a lot of programs, Virgin Atlantic, Virgin Pulse, they call themselves now. But a lot of those programs, I believe there's over 3,000 jobs in Rhode Island created because of that program. But that's little small business guy says to me, that's great, but what are you doing for me? Right. And we do, our budget has a lot of protections for people, the most needy, the most vulnerable, the people who, need social services, and we provided for that in this budget as well. There's also an increase for nursing home care and DD workers. DD is developing disabled workers. So the guy in the middle, the average guy who's working, paying their taxes, living in Rhode Island, what kind of benefit do they see? Well, they see another year of the elimination of the car tax, and in this year they'll see a tax benefit in their income tax that they pay to the state and the federal government. So I am proud of those two things in this year's budget, and we'll continue to hopefully look at the ways we can help private business grow and succeed and maintain and expand here in Rhode Island.
The Attorney General didn't necessarily, get all the big wins that he was looking for, but other aspects of the state, certainly I think you can make an argument the progressive movement got a victory with the codification or the I guess just you call it the Reproductive Privacy Act ultimately.
Yeah.
Is that something that, part of that broad compromise, and you talk about the different legislative bodies within your body, do you feel like that everyone kind of walks away from this session feeling
They
good?
got something.
They got something, a big thing.
I think some people can say that. Let's talk about the Attorney General for a minute.
Yeah.
I know Peter Nerone personally. I've got to know him when he got involved in politics. I have a tremendous amount of respect for his integrity, his work ethic, and what he's trying to do with that office, which is to expand it. He's looking into things that we've never looked at before. He's very thoughtful. If you know anything about Peter, as I have gotten to know, he'll make the right decision. Might not be the most politically popular decision, but he'll make the right decision.
Yep.
And I have a lot of confidence in him and his office, and he's got a good team around him. So I think there's a good future for that office. He's a freshman, so to speak, first year of a general officer. So he did get some legislative victories, but I know his team, they'll be back next year and they'll have more. So I think that, there was something there for him. And in general, yes, you asked about the reproductive health care. The important thing with that legislation, and I was actually talking to it with a friend of mine I work with earlier this morning, is it codified Roe v. Wade. We did not expand abortion. I want people to understand that because there's a lot of misconception. The people on the other side were saying that this was the New York-style abortion or the Virginia-style abortion. People were saying to me, can you have an abortion after the baby's born? Can you have an abortion in the 9th month? All not true at all. What we did as a General Assembly is we codified the current existing practice regarding women's right to make their own health care decisions. It's been the law for 40 years. We're not changing it. So you may ask, why would you even consider this if we're not changing it? Well, the reason is because the federal government and other states are passing very extreme measures that they know are grossly unconstitutional, but they want to trigger a case that goes to the Supreme Court, hopeful that the Supreme Court will overturn Roe v. Wade.
Right.
So I think for a lot of people and a lot of advocates in Rhode Island, this was the right time to take this issue up. And quite frankly, it was good for us to get it behind us in the General Assembly because we have a lot of important pieces of legislation, and this issue, rightfully so to some people, is everything, and it dominates the entire building. I think the speaker at one point said, and it's been repeated, it takes all the oxygen out of the room, and to some degree, I witnessed that this year. It was very hard to conduct regular business, everyday business. There were a lot of protests. They were very loud. They were very vocal, which is their right, and they're exercising their constitutional right, but doesn't make it easy for the rest of us to get our work done every day, to get in and out of the building, to get parking, to get things done. But, like anything else, the forefathers, designed our state constitution. We survived it. The issue is behind us, and we went on to produce good pieces of legislation here in Rhode Island.
Right. There did seem to be an element of politics or practicality, especially in a non-election year, not to, and go there, but it just seems like I was surprised that at one point it seemed dead in the water. Obviously, Senator Archambault's kind of threw a wrench in this to an extent, but it all kind of worked itself out. Obviously, that's out of your jurisdiction as well. But
yeah, but he changed his vote. He went from a negative to a positive, and that kind of was the holdup in the Senate. But I think ultimately everybody recognized that this was an issue that we in the General Assembly needed to have an up or down vote on it.
Yeah. And so you did, and now here we are, moved on. So does that feel, now you're going into the summer and looking to next year, do you feel in a position where some of your own personal priorities can now surface as a result of clearing the air on abortion?
No,
Yeah.
because I did get a lot of my own personal priorities approved this year, so I'm very happy. We had a very important piece of legislation regarding blockchain that I was working on for over a year and a half. That ultimately passed both chambers. I worked with Director Liz Tanner from DBR, and that's so important. 38 states are working on it, but Rhode Island was one of the first to get it done. So we recognize blockchain as a technology, and as a state, we welcome it. We try to regulate it and try to enhance it. So if any businesses are interested, we've said here in Rhode Island, we're open for blockchain business. Mm-hmm. Second of all, CVS, a major employer in the state, is in the process of merging with Aetna. They have indicated publicly that they're looking at blockchain. There was some very positive articles in Fox Business News, the Wall Street Journal, and Forbes, all regarding blockchain. So I think it's important that we need to keep this momentum going to show that Rhode Island's business-friendly and open for business. Because at the end of the day, if you're a progressive, the most progressive thing you can do is create an environment where there are good, high-paying private sector jobs. And that's what I want to do. I want to create a good environment where the private sector can thrive, and it takes a lot of the pressure off of the public sector.
Right. Last year, but like a year ago, when we still had early GOP gubernatorial primary conversations, when Giovanni Ferrosci was bringing up this notion of blockchain and the pushback that he was getting, boy, those ideas, the industries of the future, that's where we've got to go. Yeah. And you're teeing that up for us, essentially.
I agree, and I have to give Giovanni credit because I did work with him collaboratively. He was one of the people I sought out and talked about. And actually, the truth is he sought me out, and then I kind of ran with the ball. But he actually came to the General Assembly, and he testified. He was out of the country. He flew back just to testify. It was that important of an issue for him. And there's a small group of professionals here in Rhode Island who are very interested in it. And I actually had the opportunity to meet with them, and they were explaining the potential is really unlimited with this. There are very few states that recognize this. I want to be Rhode Island to be ahead of the curve. That's the beauty of being small sometimes and being nimble. We can do things faster. Everyone wants to compare us to Massachusetts. Well, we got our sports betting up and running, and they still don't have it in Massachusetts. Right. Matter of fact, the Speaker of the House has reached out to me and said, "How did you do this so quickly in Rhode Island?" And I said, "Well, it's a secret, Speaker, and I won't tell you." And it's the same thing with blockchain. We need to be ahead of the curve on some of this to take advantage of our uniqueness, our smallness. You can actually get a governor to handshake with you and also have to sit down with the Senate President and the Speaker of the House. That happens very collaboratively, very fast. I like to say, and people say, oh, they don't get along or this and that. That's all part of the process. I always tend to look at the work product. What comes out on the other end? What comes out is pretty good legislation. Not perfect. Nothing's perfect. I've learned that in life, but some of it's very good, and I'm very proud of the stuff that we passed in the House.
Yeah, it's tough to go in and have a bullet point version of the budget that you want and expect that that's going to make it through human beings.
It never happens for any one person.
Right. What about cannabis? That got a little wacky this year, didn't it? Just because of it seemed like there was the 40% tax proposed on CBD.
That did not make it in the budget. That was the hemp. I would call it the hemp tax.
Yeah.
And in all fairness to the administration that wanted the hemp tax, they wanted to use the money to set up a regulatory stream so they can regulate it. And I understand that, but that's a very burdensome 40% tax on anything. It would be like the highest in the country.
Right.
So we took that out in the House in the final budget that passed. There is no hemp tax, as I call it, but we also expanded the compassion centers or the dispensaries, depending on your point of view. Mm-hmm. We went from 3 to 6, and that was not an easy vote for a lot of people because, number one, there are cultivators who feel like that we should have only them to buy from, and I can sympathize with their position, but they made a business decision to go into a heavily regulated business. Let's not forget ourselves that today is still federally illegal to do. So there's always risk, and there's a lot of banks and financial institutions that will not do business with them. So we looked at it from a medical standpoint, and we felt there was a need. The 3 current compassion centers are doing very well. Good for them. But we felt that we as a state can get a little bit more revenue from this, but we can also expand it to make it more convenient for patients who actually need medical marijuana. We have 3 centers right now. When the next General Assembly session starts, we'll probably have 9, and I think they'll be geographically spread out over the state. And they've worked for the most part. The compassion centers, I haven't known of any real major scandals or criminal issues of any kind. They run a good operation, the 3 current ones, and I expect that the new 6 will do the same thing.
And they'll all be vertically integrated as far as it's all sort of inside the track that's already been developed, if you will.
Right now, that answer is yes. Right now, it could change. DBR will have decision making and regulatory approval over that. Norm Beerbaum, who's run the program since its inception, has run a pretty good job. So it's really ultimately up to him. But we in the General Assembly will keep a close eye, and if we need to tweak the legislation, we can do that in January if the need arises for it. But ultimately, I think that if you need medical marijuana, there'll be a place for you to get it.
Yeah, and it's interesting you touched on the depository aspect of it. That's something I spoke with, I guess he would be, I don't know, his title would be Cannabis Czar Beerbaum.
Norm Beerbaum.
Norm Beerbaum a few weeks ago, and that was something he pointed out, that in Rhode Island, the depository aspect of these businesses being on the grid, so to speak, does, even though it may be irritating to a large portion of the population that wants to see full-on cannabis legalization, at least this lays the groundwork for legitimate business, if you will.
I disagree with that. I don't think that this does that. I think this may have more of a public acceptance and may turn the public opinion into a more favorable role on it. But no, I don't think that just because you have a compassion center or a cultivator that somehow when marijuana, if and when it does become, or some people like to say when it becomes legalized, that these people will be the place to sell that. That's not necessarily true. That's something that the General Assembly will decide at some future point. I think that was a mistake that a lot of the cultivators have made. They thought that ultimately when the compassion centers expand, it would be exclusively for them, and it wasn't. So anybody who makes that leap does so at their own risk. At the end of the day, I think that cultivators and who some of I know, some run a very fine business, will still have, instead of 3 places to sell their product, will still now have 9 places to sell their product. So I know some of them feel like, oh, you should have made it only a sale only and not a grow and sale operation. But at the end of the day, we wanted parity. We wanted to keep everybody on the same level playing field. And the 3 compassion centers that exist right now, the 3 dispensaries, they can grow and they can sell. So we wanted to keep everything the same. And it's not our job in the General Assembly or even in state government to pick the winners and losers. Mm-hmm. That's the market will dictate that. So there's an opportunity if you are a up and running cultivator and you're in a substantially secure facility and you have good strong financials, you have every bit of a shot, if not a leg up, to go for one of those 6 new compassion centers. So those people in essence will be winners. Some will remain where they are and sell and they'll survive, and then some will probably lose. But that's the way it is with every business.
What other industries of the future, not even talking budget or anything like that pique your interest? I hear drone delivery system. Hey, well, let's get medicine out to Block Island on drones.
It's interesting you said that. I talked to someone who lives on Prudence Island, and I said to her, and she's a nice friend of mine, her name is Jen. I said, Jen, how often do you go off island? She goes, I don't go off island at all. She goes, I go off like once every 3 weeks. And I said, why? Don't you need food? She says, Amazon delivers to the island. So you're right. A delivery system, a network of delivery could be the way of the future, not only just to Block Island, but, we have people who live on Hog Island, people live on Prudence Island. So it is, remote delivery is a very good thing for a lot of people. I don't know what will happen with drones. I'm from Warwick. My district abuts the airport, so I'm always concerned about drones near the airport, and I'm always concerned about public safety. So, it's something we have to look at that and make sure that if we are licensing a fleet of drones, there are very specific guidelines, laws, regulations not to interfere with, passenger travel. The safety of the traveling public is paramount. The delivery system is a secondary, need, but we have to. There's a balance, and we can do both. I've read about some technology that the new drones, they can't work within a mile of an airport. There's some kind of way that they can do a geo field. The way legalized sports betting is in Warwick right now, you can do mobile betting right now at Twin River as long as you're on Twin River property. They have a geo field, and if you leave Twin River property, your phone doesn't. It's enabled only in a certain field. Well, that same technology, and by the way, we've expanded that, so now everybody can do mobile betting. That'll be up and running shortly here in Rhode Island. But the same technology could be used for drones.
Yeah, I wondered a couple of years ago, I was a drone. I was at Narragansett Beach. I was playing catch with my friend, and all of a sudden I looked up and someone was above us with a drone I would assume, taking photos, not necessarily of us, and then I started to wonder that privacy question. I mean, can you legally film people or anything from a drone that's flying over Narragansett Beach?
So the short answer is yes. That when you're a public figure, I like to say we don't have any privacy.
Right.
But yeah, when you go to Narragansett Beach and you either lie on the beach, you play frisbee, or whatever you do in public, cameras are everywhere now. When you go into the local supermarket, there's cameras. We go into a bank, there's cameras. When you come to the State House, there's cameras. When you go just about everywhere, people have cameras now. They sell them now on your doorbell. So when you press the doorbell, the camera so people can see who's at their front door. So they're everywhere. Mm-hmm.
The General Assembly thinking about 5G at all? I barely know anything about this. I don't know if anyone does outside of the people who've developed it.
So last year in the General Assembly, we enacted legislation to give us the state-of-the-art networking ability. In Rhode Island, there was an issue we had to work out between National Grid and local cities and towns about the rental and the use fee of being on telephone poles. But ultimately, that was worked out, and I think Rhode Island, maybe particularly Providence, will be one of the first in the country when we go to 5G, which is, the fastest, greatest, heavy data connection to the internet. Right. We'll have that. That's an important tool. It's an important tool for millennials because they want it. It's an important tool for business. And now Generation Z, as they call themselves, that's where they want to be, where there's free internet and it's high quality and secure. So we're getting there. Again, that's another little building block of opening up Rhode Island, offering something, taking advantage of our uniqueness, our smallness, our quality of life here to make it comfortable so people can want to live here, want to stay here, graduate from some of the leading, world-class institutions we have in Brown University, URI, PC, Rhode Island School of Design, Johnson & Wales, Roger Williams. They want to stay here. People are graduating and they tend to leave. And it's a big issue because there are not a lot of jobs. So we need to foster that, keep jobs coming here, new jobs, different jobs, internet jobs, online business. This radio show that we're doing, this podcast, is an online one that didn't exist 5 years ago. Now it exists. So we need to keep with the times, making sure that we stay competitive, to keep the talent that we have here and our families close together.
Couldn't agree more on that. I mean, that's exactly how I feel about Rhode Island, is that it's one way or the other at this point. There's not a lot of – you can't really go in the middle. You can't put up a few solar fields in a sod field and say, all right, we've made it to the future here. It's a lot bigger than that. I'm
a big proponent of solar, and from a personal standpoint, and also in my law practice, I represent several solar companies, and I think that it's a proven technology. It works. This net metering credit is helping Rhode Islanders, and it's helping all of us lower our energy bills. And it's helping a lot of municipalities and hospitals, universities lower their electrical costs. So I'm all for that because I think that all filters down and that savings gets pumped right back in the economy somewhere else.
I've heard from, particularly in Richmond, I've heard from some listeners that have seen the solar fields going on the former sod field, the turf fields, and their concern is the disruption of the bucolic nature of wherever they live. Is there a way to marry that? The idea of I know you can't put it in the woods because it'd be tree covered. So
first of all, yes, there are, and solar has done that. They put themselves on a lot of landfills and a lot of contaminated land to use it. We have a landfill and an environmentally challenged piece of land in Warwick that now hosts a solar field. North Providence, their town dump was closed. There's now a solar field on top of it. And I think they both can coexist. I think every time you present a new project, whatever it is, if it's solar or if it's a new building, if it's a new bank, if it's a new business, there's always pushback. Whether it's a self-storage facility or wherever it is, people don't like it, don't want it. But when it gets up and it grows there, they get used to it. And all their concerns and their fears tend to disappear. I think solar can coexist. And the solar projects that I have been involved with, both personally and I've seen, the reality is these are temporary uses. They're only a use for 20, 25 years, and this land gets reverted back to its natural state. There's no pollution. They use cooking oil. There's no contaminants in the land. It's a way for a lot of farmers and small families that have large parcels of land, keep them. It's a way to generate revenue for the cities and towns, for the homeowners, and it doesn't put any children in the school system, doesn't make any noise, doesn't, pollute, no noxious odors. It's not a bad neighbor, and I can say that because where I live in Warwick, there's a solar field directly across the street, and I walk my dog by there every single day, and I have no problems. I have no fears of living there, and it doesn't bother me at all.
You haven't been teleported to Pluto or anything like that?
Not yet, anyway. If I do, I'm sure you'd find me for a podcast.
Right. Last question, education. I mean, we could do a podcast series, and probably someone... well, should. I don't know if they will, but someone should do a podcast series on education in Rhode Island. I mean, you can go zoom into a single school in Providence. You can zoom out to the statewide RICAS performance relative to Massachusetts. I went to public schools here. I went to URI here. I grew up in Charahoe out in the woods, so I don't have the same perception of public education as someone who went to Woonsocket or Central. That's for sure. But what's your perspective? I mean, what's the 37,000-foot solution right now? Well,
the schools are in trouble. You have to be living under a rock not to know that, especially the Providence school system. But that's not a unique challenge. You have other cities that are in towns facing the same thing. We in the General Assembly have enacted legislation this year that changes that slightly, but ultimately this is an executive function, and we wait for the governor. We have a brand new commissioner of education. She seems very passionate about it. I give her credit for identifying the problem and not pulling any punches. I thought one of the most telling things that she said was that she would not, the schools are so bad in Providence, she would not send her children there. That's a courageous statement for a new person to, a new director to say. It's been in Rhode Island for a month. So I give her a lot of credit for that, and we have to, see what they come up with. We in the General Assembly are monitoring. We have leading advocates, Chairman McNamara, Chairman Amore. We have many people in General Assembly who are very concerned about it. We've done some stuff this year that kind of mimics what's been successful in Massachusetts, but ultimately this is not going to be a legislative fix. This is going to be an executive fix. We will be a partner in that as much as we need to be, but ultimately they're the ones setting the policy and driving the bus, and we can, fund it or not fund it or reward it. One of the things I will say, I'll give you my personal view on this, and we can close on this point, is I'm all for education. I'm all for funding education. But one of the things that we lack in general as a society or as a state, it's not unique to Providence, is we need to have some kind of accountability, some kind of a matrix. People say, we increased money. But where did the money go? What was it used for? What were the results? Did it work? Sometimes we need more money. Sometimes we don't need more money. Sometimes we need a different way of doing it. So I don't think just closing your eyes and funding it or throwing money at a problem solves it or makes it go away. It may make you feel good that, we did more for education, but the ultimate day, what are the results? Are the kids getting smarter? Are we getting what we paid for? Is it effective? Those are the questions that we have to answer. Those are the things that we need to look at. I think that that's only the right thing to do, the moral thing to do, is not just, close your eyes and throw money at it. We in the General Assembly, there was a little bit of criticism by some people, some advocates, that we didn't give any extra money to DCYF. Well, there's a reason for that. Number one, the director has said at the oversight hearings that you can't hire our way out of this problem. We can't hire our way, we can't fire our way. I think that was her quote, and I'm paraphrasing that. But at the end of the day, we have appropriated money to have a certification process. So we'll have outside people come in, professionals look at it, diagnose it, and then we can address that in January. And I think that's a good blueprint, the same blueprint to follow for education. And I think that's happening. But, for anybody to say that we didn't fund it enough. We didn't throw extra money that way. We don't know where that money's going. We don't know. I'm all for funding it. I want to fund it the right way, the smart way, and I want some accountability. I want someone to come back 6 months later, a year later, saying, you gave us this extra $5 million. This is what we did with it. These are what happened with it, and this is the result of that.
Are you worried about the evergreen contracts, and that conflicting with that, the ability to keep tabs, if you will, on where the money's going, from a personnel standpoint, that if you have an underperforming teacher, that they might be subject to, less criticism or getting canned, as you'd say?
So the answer is no. And I know a little bit about this because I had a municipal background. And also, most people don't know when they say evergreen, as I always say to them, have you read the bill? And then you hear silence because very few people have actually read the bill. There are safeguards in that evergreen bill, which is now a law. And I think that's why the governor signed it. Two things very critical, that if a union does not bargain in good faith and doesn't show up there to bargain, the city and town unilaterally can lay off people. Unilaterally can do that. So that's a very big carrot and stick to have. The other thing is any part of the contract that is subject to binding arbitration and disciplinary matters still remain in effect. They don't go away. They don't ever become evergreen, so to speak. So if a city or town didn't get along with somebody for disciplinary reasons or for performance reasons, they can invoke the binding arbitration portion of their contract, and they can terminate or go to an arbitration. And that part of the contract works both ways, both for the union and both for the school department.
Your, Cliff's Notes version right there, and definitely should read the bill.
Absolutely. I'd be happy to debate it and talk about it. And what people don't realize is evergreen has been the practice of Rhode Island for 50 years. For 50 years we've been doing this. So the world didn't come to an end for 50 years. The reality here is that there was one particular court case, an East Providence case, that changed it, and that kind of set everybody upset, kind of upset the equilibrium. And so what this bill does, it brings everybody back on a level playing field. Now, I know a lot of people in the public are unhappy with teachers or teachers union, but that's not going to change whether you have evergreen or not. And what has to happen is we all have to listen, learn, understand each other, disagree, but do so in a manner that you don't want to hate someone or not like them. You want to be able to come to the table, talk to them, learn. I always say I'm a good listener and a good learner.
Certainly key elements to getting things done. Appreciate Leader Shekarchi taking us inside his perspective on this year's budget. That's all for this episode of the Bartholomew Town Podcast, but of course I'll be back on Friday with a brand new episode. Until then, I'm Bill Bartholomew. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk soon.
At HealthSource RI for Employers, we provide access to health insurance to more than 1,100 local businesses and nonprofits, and 96% of them renew through us every year. Maybe it's our choice of 19 different health plans, our 10 years of customizing solutions, or our one local team of dedicated experts helping employers find quality health insurance. See how our numbers stack up for you. Learn more at healthsourceri.com/employers.